Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Shannon Lean. I am with EPAM. Welcome to the Revolutionizing Financial and Regulatory Compliance Reconciliation webinar. We will be introducing K3 reconciliation from Broadpeak as well. I wanted to let you know that the chat has been disabled, but any questions you may have, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen that we encourage you to ask any questions. So we will get to all questions at the end of the webinar, but please do ask any questions that you do have. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Alan, who will be facilitating the meeting.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Alan Gunn with EPAM. Let me just say a quick word. EPAM Broadpeak are your two companies bringing the webinar to you today. EPAM, Essentia, the unit of EPAM that I work with, we basically do three things. We provide consulting services in and around strategic advisory. We've done this job. We've been in your shoes. We've walked in your shoes. We know what it's like and some of the challenges you face. We provide implementation solutions. A number of our people come from or are alumni from many of the vendors in this space. And then we support and maintain systems. It was through that we really became introduced to Broadpeak. And Broadpeak's an awesome organization. They provide trading, surveillance, and data solutions really for enabling organizations to increase their execution margins, as well as remain regulatory compliant in their daily processes. So we'll have a number of panelists today. Let me first introduce Toby Kern. Toby actually came to Broadpeak through an acquisition. He was with a fund and they bought Broadpeak, and then he believed in it so much he became the CEO of Broadpeak. So he's a big fan of what they're doing in a lot of different ways. He's also has a deep experience in kind of designing, developing, and operating hedge system, compliance systems, inventory hedge systems for Exxon for many years. And on top of that, as a skier, Toby's taught me a thing or two. He's also a very avid skier. So if you have any ski questions, bring those into the scope as well. I also want to introduce Ned Stanthorpe. Ned has been involved in kind of swap reporting for 13, 14 years now. Matter of fact, that's how he knows Raheem. He met Raheem through that process and was involved in the first ICE Trade Vault connection. And then we have Raheem. Raheem, what can we say? FinTech regulatory professional extraordinaire, spent over 10 years with the ICE and working with customers of connecting their trade systems into the ICE. And I think I kid Raheem a lot. I kid him because, on the weekend, we might all read a Jack Reacher novel, but Raheem is reading regulatory filings. So definitely an expert in this space. What I'd like to do is let's go over the agenda real quick and talk about what we'll be covering now here in the next, say, 20 minutes or so. So we're going to kick it off with kind of some overview to the challenges that we face in the reconciliation process. We'll go over kind of the mandates around reconciliation, as well as the K3 advantage and kind of the integration that it brings. We'll talk about the future of reconciliation with something like a K3 solution. We're going to go into some specific key industry use cases, and then we'll talk about next steps in transforming your reconciliation process. With that, let me kick it over to Raheem.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Alan, thank you for the kind words. What I want to start off by saying is that before we kind of go into some of the challenges faced in the reconciliation process, I want to preface this conversation by saying that the regulations are constantly changing. And what we've come to realize is that the goal of all of these global regimes is to improve data, harmonize data standards, and introduce concepts like the unique product identifier, which I'm sure you guys have heard of over the last year, or moving over from an Excel file to a new XML messaging standard, I mean, the list goes on and on, right? But there seems to still be an inconsistent adoption of these new requirements by each jurisdiction. That, as you can imagine, is causing a lot of issues in the market, especially if you're trading in more than one jurisdiction, like the US or UK energy markets. So what are those challenges? And Alan and I have worked very closely with our clients, and some of the key challenges that we have come across is data management, the development work and cost involved to support these refits and rewrites, and most importantly, increased and more stringent requirements for firms to adopt and stay compliant with, regardless of whether you're a non-financial counterparty or a financial counterparty. So let's go over some of those data challenges. So as I was mentioning, regulatory reporting actually requires you to collect a very large amount of data, aggregate it, and then from different various sources if you have multiple source systems, and then make sure that it conforms to the format that the SDRs require. Managing this kind of data from different source systems can be very complex and very resource intensive for that matter. Now, as the rules change, so does the technology. Adapting to these new rules requires you to not only update your existing infrastructures, but also ensure that your development team has the right resources available to make those necessary changes to your technology. And that can be extremely costly. At times, the rules also mandate the implementation of new systems to support processes that weren't even mandated before. And then last but not least, in terms of increased regulatory obligations and compliance complexity, one of the things that I wanted to speak about is that compliance is and will remain a moving target. And the failure to not comply can lead to penalties and sometimes reputational damage if the CFTC decides to publicly disseminate that information. Added to this are multiple regimes introducing changes at the same time, but with nuances, especially around reconciliation and how it needs to be supported. Compliance teams are having to continuously reassess and update their trade reporting technologies or even processes if they're manually performing these reconciliations as the changes roll out. And sometimes these regulatory regimes are rolling them out at the same time. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Toby.
Thanks, Raheem. Yeah, so what I wanted to orient people around was the fact that in the US, a reconciliation verification mandate has now been in effect for a couple of years. What we've seen is newfound enforcement of that mandate. We've seen large fines from the CFTC recently. And what I wanted to draw market participants' attention to is that, as Raheem is going to detail in a second, these reconciliation verification mandates are rolling out all over the world. So just to be clear and to orient everyone, what this practically means is that when you report to a swap data repository, previously there was no obligation to verify that what that swap data repository was reporting to regulators was indeed correct. Now there is. And practically that necessitates a reconciliation between what you've reported to the SDR and what's in your system of record, typically your CTRM. And that's an obligation that we're not sure the market is quite ready to deal with. And to overview all of the intricacies associated with that in various regimes around the world and how those are about to change, I'm going to kick it back to Raheem.